So within the FABI project, we learned a ton about each step along the way, each step of the functional assessment-based intervention process. Along the way, we received constructive, appropriate, helpful feedback from Professor Common, and so the files above are not edited, except to add the header to make it easier to keep track of the information and which page you're on in the portfolio. But besides that, they weren't edited in lieu of feedback from Professor Common. One of the first parts of the project that stands out that I learned a lot about is social validity. Prior to this assignment, I had been thinking about intervening in behavior that was high magnitude and dangerous, but I largely ignored those frequent low magnitude behaviors. And what I ended up realizing was that the behavior we chose is low magnitude, but the frequency at which it was occurring was certainly enough to inhibit or impede the student's progress, both academically and socially. So we tackled this in order to help that student in a way that, without this course and without this assignment, probably would have flown under the radar for too long, and it would have limited our ability to close that achievement gap for that student. It also cleared up the difference between negative attention and negative reinforcement. I and some other teachers at our school thought of negative attention seeking as being negative reinforcement, and I learned that that's not the case. Even if a student is seeking attention, even if it's negative attention, that's still plus our attention, positive reinforcement for attention. The fun part was actually designing and constructing the intervention and implementing it. We talked so much about collecting data, charting data, graphing data, and then to match up different parts of the intervention that were aimed at the dual function of the student. And we had a visual timer. We broke work down into chunks. The student had an opportunity to access positive attention after he or she completed each chunk. Then we put that into place, and there was an obvious, immediate, positive change in behavior where the student was using the replacement behavior more often, and overall I think a very positive experience for us as a team. The three of us who designed the intervention, the student himself or herself, and the student's family. So special education teachers should be informed about the FABI process for a variety of reasons. First is that our knowledge about behavior as experts or expert teachers, as special education teachers used to be thought of. I think that's an important part of our job, is to put ourselves out there, make ourselves available to general education teachers, to allow them to come to us so that we can observe and make recommendations for behavior as part of a multidisciplinary team, or just as a preventative measure before a student is enrolled in special education services. So I think that's important for a variety of reasons, like limiting the over-representation of black males in special education, our ability to recommend Tier 1 and 2 interventions before actually getting to Tier 3, such as this project was. And so as we move nationally toward more inclusive practices, I think we're going to have the opportunity to be helpful to general education teachers more and more frequently. One of the things we learned about that we didn't use so in depth in the FABI process, but we learned about it, was the records review. We were to look at specific elements of student data, and in learning about that, and because of the success of our intervention, I went on to take the district's training in FBA. So one of the outcomes of that, from taking that FBA training, was that I got to participate as part of the multidisciplinary team at our school, and I actually helped observe a student with very high magnitude, very dangerous behavior, and collected data, did the records review, and then I actually wrote the intervention for this student. Of course, that was reviewed by a board certified behavior analyst before we implemented it, and she, excellent behavior analyst, was able to recommend some minor changes to it, and we were able to reduce that student's very serious behavior from several times a day to 1 or 2 times a week, and it continues to decrease in terms of magnitude and frequency. So the first success story from this project was, of course, the student for whom the FABI intervention was designed, but it was so inspiring that I continued and took the FBA training and got to make a second huge impact for another student at our school, not in my class. The knowledge from this class is in play in my classroom every day. We know that behavior is communicative. A person is showing the things that they need or want, and it's our opportunity to be sensitive to that and help them to achieve those things, sometimes in more safe ways, sometimes in more socially appropriate ways. This assignment changed the way I prioritize behavior in my classroom to include those relatively low magnitude but high frequency behaviors based on social validity. Is it impeding the student's progress academically or socially? So, a very important aspect that I got out of this project that helps me every day in my classroom. One final note, I would like to thank our professor, Professor Common, for being such a wonderful influence during this process and for inspiring me to learn more, which has allowed not only the success with the student that our project pertains to, but more students at our school with whom I work, and overall has helped to build that love for working with students who exhibit challenging behaviors.